Jacob Blaine was declared dead 5 years ago, burned beyond recognition in a wreck that left no body behind. Martin Kessler was a beloved teacher until digital fingerprints pointed to his IP address in a wave of online hate in Kayla Reed, a 12-year-old girl who vanished quietly from her hometown, leaving only her sketchbook behind. Behind the walls of trust and routine, a digital predator had built a network of hate, manipulation, and exploitation, one click at a time. Elmbrook had always been one of those towns that seemed untouched by the noise of the outside world. Nestled between cornfields and old train tracks, it was a place where people left their cars unlocked, and children rode their bikes to school without fear. The community was tight-knit, the kind where everyone showed up for church bake sales and Friday night football games. But in November 2022, something shifted. One morning, a janitor discovered a spray-painted message on the side of the local mosque, vile words written in red, dripping like fresh blood. At first, most residents believed it was the work of mischievous teens, the kind of stupid prank kids pulled without realizing the weight of their actions. But within a week, more signs appeared. A black-owned grocery store found its windows shattered and a slur etched into the door with a knife. The town's LGBTQ+ support center was set ablaze in the middle of the night. Local news ran the story, and panic began to ripple through Elmbrook. The police formed a task force, and town meetings became heated. Residents, once friendly, now eyed each other with suspicion. Rumors spread quickly. Some blamed outsiders, others pointed fingers at young people influenced by violent ideologies online. Then the digital attacks began. A wave of anonymous social media accounts began posting threats. It's not just to public places, but to individuals, teachers, students, religious leaders. Private photos were leaked. Home addresses shared. The line between physical and digital was blurring. The town's Facebook groups turned toxic, filled with arguments and false accusations. The words "You're next" appeared in a private message to a local pastor, followed by a photo of his house. Even those who once dismissed the earlier acts as harmless vandalism were now afraid. It was clear this wasn't random. The hate crimes were calculated, the online posts coordinated. Whoever was behind it wasn't just trying to scare people, they were trying to tear Elmbrook apart. The peaceful identity the town once held was crumbling. For the first time in decades, parents were pulling their children out of school, business owners were closing early, and the mayor, overwhelmed and visibly shaken, requested assistance from state authorities. In the chaos, patterns began to emerge. The targets weren't chosen at random. They all represented groups often demonized in hate forums: religious minorities, racial minorities, LGBTQ+ individuals. But more disturbingly, the online accounts spreading the threats seemed to know their targets personally. They referenced childhood nicknames, inside jokes, and specific past events. That meant whoever was behind this wasn't an outsider. They were someone from within Elmbrook. Someone watching, listening, and blending in. The sense of betrayal began to outweigh the fear. It was no longer about who might strike next, but who had already turned against them. As the town of Elmbrook wrestled with fear and paranoia, the investigation shifted into the digital realm. The online threats were relentless, sophisticated, and deeply personal. Law enforcement brought in cybercrime specialists from Indianapolis, hoping to trace the origins of the social media accounts that had flooded the internet with hatred and intimidation. The experts began sifting through metadata, timestamps, and server logs. It was a digital puzzle, and every wrong move risked alerting the person behind it. But after weeks of careful work, they finally found something alleged buried in the IP traffic patterns of one of the anonymous posts, pointed to a residential address in the heart of Elmbrook. That address belonged to Martin Kessler, a respected high school history teacher with no criminal record and a reputation for community involvement. He lived alone, kept a quiet routine, and volunteered on weekends. When officers arrived to question him, Martin was calm but clearly confused. He allowed them to inspect his home network. Forensic experts immediately noticed unusual activity on his router logins at odd hours. Strange bandwidth spikes and traffic rerouted through multiple proxy servers. It appeared that someone had hijacked his internet connection and used it to post the threats. The technical term was piggybacking. Someone had accessed Martin's Wi-Fi using a long-range antenna and disguised their location.
Oh.
It was a clever move, one that would misdirect the investigation and potentially ruin an innocent man's life. Martin's alibi was airtight. He'd been volunteering at a school fundraiser during the exact window when the most recent digital threats had been posted. The event was recorded, his presence verified on camera. It was cleared, but the damage had been done. Rumors spread. Whispers lingered, and Martin's classroom emptied the next day. Investigators widened their scope. Whoever was responsible had deep knowledge of digital security. They used disposable SIM cards, encrypted messaging apps, masking techniques that rivaled those seen in large-scale cybercrime rings. This wasn't the work of a lone prankster or amateur hacker. This was someone with experience, someone methodical and precise. They weren't just hiding their identity. They were creating false trails and letting others take the fall. As more data was analyzed, a chilling realization surfaced. Several of the posts had originated from locations near public Wi-Fi zones, coffee shops, libraries, even school parking lots. The attacker never connected from the same place twice. It left no fingerprints, no visible patterns, except one. Each time a hate message was posted online, a digital signal also attempted to access restricted school networks. It was subtle, hidden in the noise, but undeniable. Elmbrook wasn't just under attack from hate crimes. Someone was probing its digital infrastructure, testing boundaries, accessing student directories, downloading files that had no reason to be downloaded. The connection between hate and hacking was no longer theoretical. It was active. And it pointed to something far darker than the town had imagined. Something that suggested this wasn't just about spreading fear. This was about control, manipulation, and perhaps a much deeper agenda. A month into the investigation, the focus shifted again when an anonymous tip led authorities to an old abandoned hunting cabin deep in the forest on the edge of Elmbrook. It was the kind of place people had forgotten existed, tucked behind overgrown trails and long-unused logging roads. Inside, the cabin was empty, except for a cracked wooden table and a moldy mattress. But hidden beneath the floorboards, police found a small, dirt-covered metal lockbox. Inside, it was a weathered laptop wrapped in plastic, alongside a portable hard drive and a collection of SIM cards. Back at the forensics lab, experts began the long process of breaking into the encrypted laptop. What they uncovered wasn't just relevant, it was terrifying. The laptop contained folders labeled with children's names. Each folder held images, chat logs, video recordings, and metadata timestamps. Many of the conversations had taken place through gaming apps, educational platforms, and popular messaging services. Most disturbing was how personal the messages were. The tone was friendly, gentle, sometimes disguised as another child. It was textbook grooming, emotional manipulation, subtle coercion, and long-term psychological pressure. Among the names was one that immediately stood out: Kayla Reed. She had been reported missing 3 months earlier, just before the hate crimes began. At the time, her disappearance was believed to be a runaway case. But the evidence now suggested something far more sinister. The chat logs revealed how she had been targeted through a drawing app that allowed private messages. The conversations slowly escalated over weeks, starting with compliments on her artwork, and ending with suggestions that she meet someone in person who understood her better than her family did. Other names began to match with reports from neighboring towns. Children who had gone missing or had sudden behavioral changes. Children who had reported being contacted by strangers online but were never taken seriously. The hard drive connected to the laptop had even more disturbing content. Files with auto-delete timers, recordings taken through hacked webcams, scripts that appeared to automatically scan school district websites for student directories and contact information. What shocked investigators most was the level of detail. This wasn't random. This child had been carefully chosen. Patterns began to emerge. Kids from broken homes, kids with limited supervision, kids active in online spaces where anonymity thrived. The operation had been running for months, maybe years, and whoever was behind it had stayed invisible, protected by layers of digital misdirection and the false sense of safety that online spaces often create. This discovery forced investigators to reevaluate everything. The hate crimes that had dominated headlines were not the core objective. They were smoke and mirrors, designed to draw attention, stir unrest, and distract the community while the real operation unfolded in the background. It became clear that the town wasn't just being attacked socially or politically. It was under siege in a way no one had anticipated. Children were being hunted not with violence, but with code, psychology, and silence. As digital analysts continued to dig through the files recovered from the laptop and hard drive, they uncovered a small error buried deep within the code. It was a minor flaw in a timestamp conversion script inconsistency that didn't match up with any U.S. time zones. That misalignment led investigators to a foreign-hosted server located in a data center somewhere in Eastern Europe. It was heavily encrypted and masked behind multiple fake company registrations. But once authorities gained access through international cybercrime coordination, they discovered an even more expansive database, one that dwarfed what they had found on the laptop. The server housed thousands of folders, many containing sensitive data stolen from school systems, private devices, and online learning platforms. Each folder was organized by geographic region and age group. It had video files, photos, chat transcripts, and detailed behavioral profiles. This was no small-time operation. It was a systematic network of surveillance and exploitation, fueled by stolen identities and access to children's digital lives. The coordination, scale, and technical sophistication were far beyond what anyone had expected from a case that began with hate symbols sprayed on buildings. Within this database, an admin panel used a single recurring alias, SpectralVox. Through digital tracing and behavioral analysis, SpectralVox was soon matched to a real identity, Jacob Blaine, 5 years earlier. He had worked as an IT technician in Elmbrook, repairing school servers and installing classroom firewalls. Quiet and introverted, Jacob had left town abruptly after a supposed car crash out of state. Death was assumed when his burned-out vehicle was discovered with traces of blood and charred paperwork inside. A closed casket funeral was held. No body was recovered. No one questioned it until now. Jacob had faked his death with precision, using it as a smokescreen to vanish from his old life and dive into the digital underworld. He knew the systems well, how the school networks worked, how the students interacted online, and how to bypass security tools. He used that knowledge to build a virtual maze of fake accounts, ghost servers, and backdoors into trusted platforms. Under SpectralVox, Jacob became a respected figure in dark web communities, offering tutorials, trading files, and coordinating attacks under the guise of ideology. But the truth was far more strategic. Jacob had weaponized hate to destabilize his hometown, exploiting the fear and confusion it caused. The rise in hate crimes wasn't random. It was a tool, a deliberate method to distract law enforcement and the public, keeping their attention on external threats while he operated in the shadows. The digital grooming, exploitation, and surveillance of minors had been his true objective all along. Further analysis of the server logs revealed recent activity. Spectral that had been online just days before. It was still active, still connected, and likely still close. With the evidence mounting, a national alert was issued. But Jacob had covered his tracks too well. He was no longer just a local threat. He had become a phantom one step ahead, hidden behind screens and silence, leaving nothing but digital footprints and broken lives in his wake. With Jacob Blaine's identity confirmed and his vast digital footprint exposed, the manhunt intensified. The FBI took the lead, coordinating with cybercrime units across several countries. It was clear that Jacob hadn't acted alone for long. The server logs pointed to interactions with dozens of other users, some exchanging files, others requesting specific types of content or information. But Jacob remained the center of it all, was the architect, the enabler, and the face of something far more terrifying than Elmbrook had imagined. Investigators traced cryptocurrency payments, linked to domain registrations, and dark web transactions. One trail led them to a tiny town in upstate New York where, tucked into the woods, sat an unregistered farmhouse, purchased under a shell company name. Satellite imagery revealed solar panels, satellite dishes, and what appeared to be a small building separate from the main house, just enough to raise suspicions. A tactical team was dispatched, moved in at dawn, surrounding the property without alerting anyone inside. What they found was disturbing. Inside the main house was a nearly empty living space, just a mattress, canned food, and one battered laptop. But beneath a rug in the back room was a trapdoor. It opened to a narrow staircase leading to an underground room lined with servers, cooling fans humming steadily. There were at least 6 operating machines running 24/7, all protected by redundant power systems. The walls were covered with maps, printed screenshots, usernames, and notes scribbled in red ink. It was a command center built for one purpose: control. On one monitor, real-time surveillance feeds from hacked webcams across the country flickered. On another, a terminal window showed ongoing scripts crawling school websites for vulnerabilities. Jacob had created his own data mine, targeting students and teachers alike, manipulating online systems without ever needing to step outside. It was all hidden in plain sight, buried beneath the distractions of social unrest and hate crimes. Jacob was found hiding in a crawlspace behind the wall, trying to destroy a set of USB drives when the team apprehended him. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared. The drives were recovered, and their contents would later link him to over a dozen child exploitation rings, several coordinated hate crime campaigns, and illegal access to more than 300 school networks. In the aftermath, Kayla Reed was found alive in another location days later. Rescued because of information stored on Jacob's server, many other children were also identified and removed from dangerous situations. The scope of what Jacob had done was staggering, but perhaps more frightening was how easily he had done it, using tools that were widely available, platforms that millions trusted, and knowledge gained from an ordinary IT job. Elmbrook tried to return to normal, but the scars ran deep. What had started as simple acts of hate had masked something far darker. The real crime wasn't just what Jacob did, was how quietly and effectively he used fear to shield his true intentions. He proved that in the digital age, the most dangerous predators aren't the ones who shout they the ones who whisper behind the screen, waiting for no one to notice.